In 2 years, the price of a pound of ground beef in America rose by almost half, from around 60 cents in 1971 to nearly 90 by the spring of 1973. So in the first week of April that year, millions of American households did something the country had never quite seen. They stopped buying meat. All of it. On purpose. For a week. They called it a boycott, and for 7 days it was widely described as the largest consumer protest the nation had seen. It moved the price of dinner exactly once, and not in the direction anyone expected. Here is the short answer, before the long one. They did not lower the price of beef. What they did instead was far stranger, and it taught a generation of households how little of their own grocery bill they actually controlled. Now the long answer, and it begins at the meat counter, not in Washington. Through the 1960s, the price of beef had been one of the steady things in American life. Then it came loose. By the retail price figures the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracked, the cost of ground beef and of the better cuts climbed through 1972 and into 1973 faster than almost anything else a family bought. Ground beef that had sat near 60 cents was closing on 90. Round steak that had run near $1.10 was pushing toward $1.50. In the 12 months into the spring of 1973, retail meat prices rose somewhere between a fifth and a quarter. Not over a decade, over about a year. Now put that on a real page. Take the household this channel keeps returning to, the single paycheck family a little above the middle, living on the roughly $200 a week that actually walked in the door after taxes. Out of that, by the Department of Agriculture's family food plans, something like a quarter to a third went to food. Call it $60 to $65 a week to feed 4 people. And of the grocery bill, meat was the single largest line, often a quarter to a third of it all by itself. When the meat line jumps a fifth in a year, it does not just nudge the total. It reaches into every other line on the page and starts taking. The family that wanted to hold the food budget flat had exactly 2 moves: buy cheaper cuts or buy less. Most did both, and a growing number began to wonder why they should have to do either. Because here is the part that made people angry, rather than just tired. The rising price at the counter did not seem to be anybody's fault that they could see. The butcher was making no more than before. The shopper, obviously, was not the cause. The cause was upstream, out of sight, and it had a lot of moving parts. The household could feel all 3 at once without being able to name a single one. The first was cattle feed. In 1972, the United States sold an enormous quantity of grain to the Soviet Union, tens of millions of tons of wheat and feed grain, in a deal so large and so favorable to the Soviets that the press later called it the Great Grain Robbery. It drained American grain reserves and sent the price of feed, corn, and wheat sharply upward. Wheat roughly doubled in under a year, and a beef cow is, in economic terms, a machine that turns feed grain into meat. When feed doubles in price, the cost of finishing a steer for market climbs right behind it, and that cost has to come out at the far end, at the retail case. The second was the dollar itself. We have told this story before on this channel. In August of 1971, President Nixon had closed the gold window and cut the dollar loose, and by 1973, it had been formally devalued twice, once under the Smithsonian Agreement at the end of 1971, and again in February of 1973. A cheaper dollar makes American beef cheaper for foreign buyers, so more of it was sold abroad, and it makes everything imported cost more at home. Both pressures pushed the domestic price of meat up. The third was simply money and demand. The economy of 1972 and 73 was running hot, wages were up, employment was high, and Americans were eating a great deal of meat, on the order of 85 pounds of beef a person a year, near the highest the country had ever reached. More buyers, more dollars, chasing a supply of cattle that could not be grown overnight. A calf takes about 2 years to become a steak. Demand can rise in a season. Supply cannot. So the price at the counter was the sum of the grain deal, the devaluation, and a 2-year calf arriving on a single sticker that just said $1.49. The household could not see the grain deal or the devaluation. It could only see the sticker. And in the early spring of 1973, a growing number of households decided that if they could not touch the causes, they could at least refuse the sticker. The idea spread the way things spread in 1973, without the internet and faster than you would think. Local consumer groups, church groups, and neighborhood organizations, most of them run by women, began calling for a national week without meat. The call was simple, and it needed no headquarters. For 1 week, the first week of April, skip beef, pork, and lamb entirely. Buy eggs, buy fish, buy cheese, buy beans, and let the meat sit in the case. Word moved by telephone tree, by mimeographed flyer stapled to the supermarket corkboard, by the evening news picking it up and carrying it into every living room in the country. A woman at a kitchen table in a suburb outside Chicago or Los Angeles did not need to be told the price of hamburger. She had watched it climb every week on the same receipt. And now, she had somewhere to put the anger. And for that 1 week, it worked as theater, which is to say it worked completely. A Gallup poll taken at the boycott's end found that more than a quarter of American consumers, on the order of 50 million people, had taken part in some way. Meat sales at major grocery chains fell sharply, by figures reported in the range of a fifth to a half depending on the region and the store, and far more than that in some middle-income city neighborhoods. Butchers cut back orders. Some meat departments went to skeleton stock. Newspapers ran photographs of near-empty cases and of shoppers steering their carts pointedly past them. For the first time, the diffuse private frustration of millions of separate kitchens had become one visible public fact. The housewife, a figure the economy usually treated as invisible, had helped organize the largest consumer action the country had seen, and she had done it from the phone in the kitchen. Washington had already flinched before the week even began. On the 29th of March, 1973, days ahead of the boycott, the Nixon administration announced ceilings on the price of beef, pork, and lamb, freezing them at the levels of that moment. This was not out of nowhere. The country was still under the wage and price control system Nixon had launched in 1971. Then, in its looser third phase, run by a body called the Cost of Living Council, meat had largely been left to move on its own. Now, under the pressure of the boycott and the anger behind it, the government reached in and put a lid directly on the price of meat. And here is where the story turns from a protest into a lesson in what a price actually is. Because the ceiling did not do what the household hoped. A price is not only a number the shopper pays, it is also the signal that tells the rancher, the feedlot, and the packer whether it is worth their while to bring an animal to market at all. Freeze the price the shopper pays, while the cost of feed the rancher pays keeps climbing, and you have quietly told every cattleman in America to stop selling. Which is close to what happened. I think the freeze made the shortage worse, and the record shows why. Through the summer of 1973, with the ceiling holding retail prices down but feed costs still high, ranchers held cattle back rather than sell at a loss. Some fed animals longer, some held breeding stock off the market, and a few in scenes that made the papers drowned chickens and talked of doing the same with livestock rather than sell below cost. Cattle slaughter fell sharply, well below the year before. The freeze meant to protect the shopper produced by late summer the one thing worse than an expensive steak. No steak, shortages, meat cases empty again, but this time, not by choice. The ceiling came off in the middle of September 1973, and the price, released, did exactly what a held spring does. it jumped. Beef prices rose sharply into the autumn, higher than they had been in March, because now the pent-up cost and the lost supply and the resumed demand all arrived at once. The household that had gone without in April and had cheered the ceiling was by October paying more than before the whole episode began. The boycott had moved the price for a week. The ceiling had moved it down for a season, and then up harder afterward. When the dust settled, the trend line of meat prices ran right through the middle of the whole affair, as if none of it had happened. Because the forces underneath, the feed and the dollar and the demand, had never been touched. You cannot boycott a grain deal. You cannot picket a devaluation. So did it fail? On the only measure the organizers named, the price, largely yes. Meat did not come down and stay down because families skipped it for a week. But that is not the same as saying nothing happened, and it is worth being precise about what did. What the week actually did was reveal the shape of the whole system to the people trapped inside it. A household that had felt, privately, that its budget was slipping for reasons it could not name, learned in that first week of April that its neighbors felt exactly the same, that the frustration was universal, and that the levers were nowhere near the kitchen. It learned that the price of dinner was set by a grain deal signed in Moscow, by the value of a currency decided in Washington, by a devaluation and a feedlot and a 2-year calf, and that a mother deciding to serve tuna casserole on a Tuesday could touch none of it. The boycott did not lower the price of beef. It showed a generation of households, with total clarity, how little of their own cost of living they actually controlled. That is a bitter thing to learn. It is also, arguably, the most useful thing the decade taught. It changed the politics too, in ways that outlasted the meat case. The image of the organized housewife, the consumer as a bloc that could act, fed directly into the consumer movement of the middle 1970s. And it taught policymakers a lesson written in empty cases. A price control laid over a real shortage does not abolish the shortage. It only moves it from the price tag to the shelf. By 1974, the last of the Nixon controls were being dismantled, and the meat episode was one of the clearest reasons why. Look at the household ledger across that whole year, and you can read the entire arc in the food line. Spring, the meat line held down, artificially, by the ceiling, and a family briefly relieved. Late summer, the meat line thin, not because prices fell, but because the case was empty. Autumn, the meat line higher than it had ever been, the ceiling gone, the reckoning arrived. 3 acts, and at the end of them, the family is exactly where the underlying arithmetic always said it would be, only angrier and wiser, and a little more certain that the game was not built for them to win. That was the real result of the week America stopped buying meat. Not a lower price. A clearer picture, the households of 1973 went to war with a sticker, 60 cents becoming 90 becoming, by October, more than either, and discovered in 7 days the entire machine standing behind it. They could not move the machine, but they never again mistook the sticker for the whole story. And on a channel about how ordinary families read their own budgets, that may be the most important thing a boycott ever bought. If the way these households read a price tag is something you want to keep following, stay a while. There is a whole decade of it, line by line.